Thanks everyone for joining us for this post-session legislative briefing. What an exciting day for Texas. We have seen Governor Abbott veto Senate Bill 3, a bill that would have been devastating to the hemp industry. It would have recriminalized the many Texans who use these products responsibly. And we're just so deeply grateful that the governor has seen the light on this issue and hasn't allowed the fear and misinformation to cloud his judgment. We saw with the proclamation that he laid out that he wants to see regulation. He says that's the only way to truly protect consumers and to keep these products away from young people. So again, we are so grateful to Governor Abbott for doing the right thing with vetoing Senate Bill 3. We also saw just a couple days ago, he signed House Bill 46. This is Chairman Ken King's bill to expand and improve the compassionate use program. It's been a long time coming, trying to get this medical program into a place where it actually is going to help more patients. And not only does the new bill allow more patients access to the program, it allows them broader access to different types of products. We're going to get into all of that. So I want to start off by thanking all of the many volunteers and organizations that have done tremendous work this legislative session, getting to the Capitol, having conversations, keeping the conversation going, doing outstanding media interviews, putting their very best face forward on this issue, because really it's just too important to do anything less. And so I really want to thank the Texas Cannabis Collective, one of the leading grassroots organizations in the state, helping to rally activists and allow them the opportunity to participate in lobby days and direct actions with us at the Capitol. Special thanks to Holly McCord on the call here. She is the newest member to the Policy Center team, and we are better because you are on the team, Holly. I'm just so grateful for your work all session long in helping us to get the word out on all the good work that's being done. But the other volunteers also throughout the legislative session, the Texas Hemp Business Council did an outstanding job rallying businesses, making sure they knew how to take action, collecting over 150,000 signatures on a petition, and then printing them all and rolling them into the governor's office to ensure that he knew exactly how many Texans are paying attention and reject prohibition, favoring regulation instead. The Texas Hemp Coalition continues to do good work with an outstanding board of directors and members that are actively engaged in this process. And all of these business groups helping to engage not only the businesses that are members of these organizations, but also activating their customers. This is people power, and that is what this movement is about. It's been so exciting to see how it has all unfolded. Another organization that's been helpful along the way is Ground Game Texas. They ran all of these local campaigns for decriminalization. Of course, we did see a court case that seems to be rolling some of that back. But like we also have seen with Austin saying, well, maybe we can't have a formal ordinance, but our police officers still have discretion. They can still choose whether or not to arrest somebody for marijuana possession, and they've decided not to. District attorneys also have discretion whether or not they spend their valuable resources prosecuting people for possession of cannabis. I don't think they're going to do it. And with the way that the law is shaking out, we have one lane for marijuana and one lane for hemp. This law, this prohibition bill, wouldn't have even solved that because they have different penalties, whether it's legal cannabis or illegal cannabis. You can't tell by looking at it. You have to go forward and testing it. This is a boondoggle. It has been, and the problem is prohibition, that they're trying to find a way to bits and pieces, and we need a comprehensive approach. Thankfully, we are going into overtime with the legislative session. We had the regular legislative session, went from January 14th, I believe, until June 2nd, and we were able to see one really great bill. We had one really bad bill. Actually, two bad bills. One was definitely worse with Senate Bill 3, but another bad bill that really slipped under the radar for too many of us, really, including myself, was the vape ban. They're restricting vape availability in general, including non-nicotine vapes, but they're also prohibiting all cannabinoid vapes entirely, except for those that are available in the compassionate use program. And we're going to talk about that. So that bill passed. Senate Bill 3 passed, sadly, and 46 was the only good bill that really passed on cannabis this session. So I think everybody's doing great. We all remember, we're all in the routine of the Zoom. It hasn't been a long time since we had to meet this way. And everybody's still on mute. I appreciate that. We're going to do a little bit of time. I'm going to go until 5:30 and talking about these policies and the timeline moving forward. And then we're going to open up for questions for the second half of this briefing. I really enjoy fielding questions and allowing the audience here to guide the direction so that we are talking about the most important topics to you. So first, diving in, we talked about Senate Bill 2024. That is the vaping bill. It prohibits all vape devices except for those cannabinoid vape devices, except for those within the compassionate use program. Obviously, it's my position that prohibition is never going to work. Only responsible regulation can help to make sure that products are safe, and people are going to be going to the black market. They can ship these products in from anywhere. Banning them from being sold by Texas businesses isn't going to make us any safer. So I do think that that's a misguided policy, but it did pass into law. Let's look at House Bill 46. This is the Compassionate Use Program expansion bill. And on Saturday, I believe it was, the governor signed it into law. This is the most significant expansion that we've seen of this program. It was established in 2015 as a very unreasonably limited program, only for those with intractable epilepsy, and it was only oil products. Since then, the program has been expanded twice, now for a third time, and now we're seeing chronic pain being added as a qualifying condition, which makes sure that patients don't have to turn to opioids. This is so incredibly important for so many people that are suffering from chronic and debilitating pain. They now have a natural alternative through medical cannabis. Other conditions were added like ulcerative colitis and anyone who is in hospice or going through palliative care. It really shouldn't have taken us so long to get hospice and palliative care included, but there is an advisory board within the Department of State Health Services. They recently, earlier, must have been last year, passed a resolution, including in their report that they advocated for adding palliative care as a qualifying condition and pain. So having that advisory board make that recommendation, I think contributed to our ability to open up this program. So really grateful for that board making the recommendation that they did. There are lots of different boards and commissions within the different agencies that manage the different affairs and business of the state. These advisory boards often open up to the public for members to serve on. A lot of their meetings are open to the public. And so as we all find our own niche and finding out the areas where we want to participate, look out for opportunities like that for serving on the board, or just making sure that you know when their meetings are happening. You know, that meeting with the Palliative Care Advisory Board was flagged for me from somebody, and I didn't even know about it happening. I went back and looked, but it just reminded me how many opportunities there are to engage, not just in the legislative session, but throughout the interim in the regulatory side of things. There's lots of opportunity, which we're going to talk more about the rulemaking process. But getting back to the compassionate use program. I also want to invite you to visit our website, texascannabispolicy.org. You can do that now, do that later. I am very proud of the work that we've done to pull everything together so that if you want to know everything that happened with medical cannabis this session, you're going to be able to come to this webpage and take a look at the progress we were able to make. I tell you what, Senate Bill 3 and House Bill 46 were roller coasters of emotion, roller coasters up and down as far as the policies being amended and substituted. It was hard to keep up with. What we have here is the final version of House Bill 46 as signed by the governor. So let's just talk about a few of these changes that were made. Patients are certified for 1 year now. Before, they didn't specify that. 1 year is pretty standard. I think 2 years would be good for patients. But nonetheless, 1 year and you get 4 refills for 90-day supplies. This is new, but I think reasonable, much like many other prescriptions are given. You get about a year and you have to go in and get a new supply every 90 days or so. The prescriptions are going to be monitored by the Texas Medical Board. They are looking to have a keen eye on the doctors who are prescribing cannabis, so that they can make sure that we're not over-prescribing. I don't think this is much of a problem. I also don't think it's much of an issue because cannabis is safer than aspirin. But if they want to monitor it and see just how safe it is, we welcome all of the data that they're going to be able to pull from that. Product availability, we are going to be able to use patches and lotions now. Suppositories are going to be available for patients, which is really important for those who can't take cannabis any other way. It gets right into their bloodstream. One of the biggest things is coming back to this vaping situation, inhalable products. That means concentrates are going to be available through vaping devices. Well, inhalable devices, that includes vape, inhaler, and nebulizer. The Department of State Health Services is responsible for establishing rules to approve different devices. So we're going to talk about rulemaking in a minute, but if you have information or know folks that are experts in this space, make sure that they are engaged on this, because the Department of State Health Services is going to need expertise in writing the rules for these devices. They're going to be metered devices because every dose has to be 10 milligrams. So if you have a vape, basically every pull that you take from it would be 10 milligrams estimated. I know that Louisiana has something like this, perhaps other states as well. We can try to learn from other states, learn from the good, and try to avoid any pitfalls that they may have fallen into. But having inhalable devices is so important for patients that need immediate uptake. When it goes into your lungs, it doesn't take but a couple minutes for it to hit into your bloodstream and into your brain and affect the body in the way that you're looking for it to affect. This can help make sure that you stop, and you can stop seizures in their tracks. You can help to quell a PTSD episode that you may feel coming on. There is so much benefit to having inhalable products available. And one thing that's important to note is that while there's a 10 milligram per dose cap, that means 10 milligrams per unit, so per gummy. It doesn't mean that you can only take 10 milligrams. Your doctor would have to prescribe, if you need 30 milligrams for your morning meds, they would prescribe 30 milligrams and you would take 3 of the gummies or edibles, or however you use it, 3 pulls from your vape. So you're able to get as many milligrams as you need through your doctor, but it's limiting just how much can be in each serving. So that's important to note. What else is really cool, though, is that the way that the bill is written, concentrates, as they should be, are excluded from the 1% and 10 milligram cap. So these inhalable devices can use concentrated products that are free from the unreasonable restrictions that are in place from other products. That's a really good thing for patients. Also, one thing that they included is limiting to natural phytocannabinoids. I think that there may be some room for conversation since converted cannabinoids have become so popular and can be made safely. For now, though, they're limiting it only to natural phytocannabinoids. The qualifying conditions that were added, I know that I mentioned it earlier, chronic pain was added as a condition, TBI, traumatic brain injury, was added, Crohn's disease, and terminal conditions where you're on hospice or palliative care. This is in addition to the other conditions that have been added over the years, like PTSD, multiple sclerosis, spasticity. There's a whole list of neurodegenerative disorders that the Department of State Health Services approved. That includes things like Huntington's disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. There's over 100 conditions on that list, most of which are very, very rare. And so most people aren't going to benefit from that list, but some will, and that's a good thing. So we're grateful to see the scope of patients that have access really rounding out. I will say, though, that we have always been advocates of doctors being the ones deciding, not having politicians creating a list of those who are worthy of using cannabis, especially considering the safety profile of this medicine. One interesting thing is that while the department can't add new qualifying conditions directly, they are going to be opening up a portal of sorts for physicians who are registered with the program to recommend adding new conditions. So the physician with backup information would recommend to the department that we add new conditions, say AIDS or HIV has lots of backup research, we want to add that as a qualifying condition. DSHS would then take those submissions and be able to recommend to the legislature that they add these conditions. I think this is a little bit of a cop-out for just allowing the department to do it, but I do appreciate that they're trying to get more input and create new avenues for getting feedback from physicians.
How did I get here?
Let's talk about licensing and regulation. As we all know, there are only 3 licensed businesses under the compassionate use program. That is a big problem with such a limited market. So now we have more patients, and we're going to have a total of 15 businesses licensed by April 1st. There is a round of licensure that will happen by December 1st, but certainly by April 1st, we'll have 15 new businesses that can open up satellite locations. They'll be distributed throughout Texas's public health regions, which you can see here on this map. This is to ensure reasonable statewide access for all patients, and we appreciate that they're working on getting the medicine closer to patients, so it's not the big show that it has to be as far as the meetup locations anymore. Licenses have to be active. If you aren't using your license for 2 years, you are getting it revoked. It's unbelievable that one of the businesses was allowed to be dormant for so long, not using their license. Thankfully, we're getting that fixed. And let me say that they have come up and running since then, but it was a long time. And I appreciate that they've added this in. The licensing process. So there are going to be 9 new licenses issued by December 1st of this year. These 9 licenses have to be pulled from the existing pool of applicants. As you may recall, over the last few years, the Department of Public Safety has opened up 2 application periods where they took people's money, they took their applications, and then did nothing with those applications. The legislature is instructing them to use that pool of applicants. And it's hard to say who's still going to be in the same financial position that they were in at the time, but some will be, and those are the folks that are going to get the first 9 licenses at least. They could do the entire 12 if they want, the additional 12 plus the 3 we already have, but they don't have to. They could open up another application period and accept 3 more by April 1st. So we're really glad to see more businesses being able to participate. I'm not a fan of licensing caps, but I do appreciate that we're starting to get more businesses in, and we can work on repealing that cap of 15 at a later date. While we're talking about the compassionate use program, let's talk about the rulemaking. Now, we've talked about legislative engagement that we all just got out of the ringer and headed into overtime. But in addition to legislative advocacy and then the judicial work, the lawsuits that are in play also, there's also the rulemaking process. So you can think about the statutes as being kind of the bones of it all, and then the regulators pass rules, regulations that become the meat on the bones. They fill in the details, and they work on actually executing the will of the legislature and whatever their objective is. And when the legislature passes a law that impacts what a regulatory agency does, they have to open up the rulemaking process, which is where they reevaluate the rules on the books. They evaluate whether or not they need to add more. This is a public process that we can all participate in, and we should participate in. So moving forward, the Department of Public Safety is going to be creating rules about satellite location application process, about the design and security of those satellite locations, establishing a timeline for reviewing and taking action on applications because they weren't doing that before. So now they have to create an actual timeline and stick to it, which it will include that DPS has to take action on an application within 180 days, which I think is more than fair. They have to create rules on monitoring whether a dispensing organization, one of the licensed businesses, is operating and how to revoke those if necessary. These rules have to be adopted by October 1st. There also needs to be a 30-day public comment period where they have to publish the rules in the Texas Register, which is where it's public for everyone to look at, and they will take public comment. Usually it's an online portal where you can submit comments. In the past, in these rulemaking processes, we've seen thousands of comments submitted, a lot of really good feedback for these regulators to better understand the issue, the implications of the rules that they've proposed, and allows us all to have a voice in that. So if they have to be adopted by October 1st and there's a 30-day period, I think that it comes sometime in August is when they actually publish, because once they get the feedback, they're going to need to adjust and then finalize the rules. That isn't set in stone here, but that is generally my understanding of how that timeline would work. So I'd be on the lookout in August for the rulemaking process within DPS to start playing out. So keep that in mind. We talked about the licenses and the timeline for that, December 1st for the first 9, an additional 3 coming on April 1st. Regulations with the Department of State Health Services. This is the process for doctors to submit their recommendations for additional conditions, establishing rules relating to medical devices for pulmonary inhalation, a reasonable timeline for reviewing and granting approval for these devices. And this is the same timeline with the October 1st. We'll know what the final rules are. And then we talk here about the medical board approving their monitoring system. So this is the rulemaking process, which is really important. I welcome y'all on our website to look under resources. I have this political timeline here where you can see the next several months and what different opportunities we have. So in July, we have the special session. I think August is when the proposed rules come. We're hosting the Texas Cannabis Policy Conference in September at Texas A&M, and we welcome all of you to join us. We are opening up speaker recommendations, and we have sponsor opportunities, so keep that in mind. October is when the rules get adopted. December, the licensing deadline, like we talked about, but also now we're getting into the politics of it. December is the deadline for candidates to file. If you are interested in recruiting a candidate or supporting a candidate to oppose the person that is currently representing you, that is the deadline that they have to file by. So let's keep that in mind as we move forward on this political timeline. March is when the primaries happen. So in Texas, we have the primary election in March, and we have the general election in November. Primaries are generally more impactful because our state is so gerrymandered that every district is pretty much predetermined to be Democrat or Republican based on demographics and voting history. That is definitely another issue. But gerrymandering is something that we should all care a lot about and work to change. But in the meantime, it is what it is. And we have districts that are blue or red. And so this is the beginning of that process where you go to your primary to participate in the election, decide who's going to be on the ballot. If you're on the red team or the blue team, whichever you're affiliated with, you go to pick the best candidates you can so that you send them to the general election to compete against the other parties. This primary is what kicks off the convention process for political parties. They will host a precinct convention and then a county convention and then a state convention. The state convention is in June. At every stage in this political process, you can show up and participate as a delegate. You can get resolutions passed in favor of cannabis reform. We did it years ago to get cannabis on the platform in the Republican Party. It was already in the Democratic Party and most certainly in the Libertarian Party. And so we worked to get it into the Republican Party. Since COVID, it's been a wreck, and we need to get back in there. We all felt the huge opposition that we were faced with this legislative session, and we can help to diffuse some of that and to build on the conservative support, the general support that we already see in both political parties, let me say, and build that by participating in this process. We're going to need another training event to talk about that, which is the civic engagement workshop I'm thinking about for February. Because this is a really great way to be involved in the grassroots part of the political process. So that process starts in March. It culminates in June, the big state conventions where they pass their party platform. Each of the resolutions that passed along the way will be considered, and whatever gets approved becomes the official position of the political party. So hopefully we can get some better cannabis policies in the party platform, which helps to roll us into the next legislative session. Again, we'll be doing the conference next September as well. General election is in November. Pre-filing for legislation starts just 6 days after these people are elected. So we're going to be ready to hit the ground running in November of next year as we go into the 2027 legislative session. When I say 2027, it feels very far off. It really isn't. It really happens very quickly. So we'll just stay engaged every step of the way. For those who aren't already on our email list, please join so that we can stay active and engaged. Join the other different organizations, especially if you own a business. Join up with one of the business associations. They're going to be giving you opportunities to participate as a business owner as well. So stay fully engaged there as well. Okay, we need to talk about Senate Bill 3. We have a big victory on our hands, my friends. People said it couldn't be done, and we decided that they needed to stay out of the way while we went ahead and did it. And Governor Abbott vetoed Senate Bill 3 last night. It is such an exciting moment. And while we're going to be regrouping and getting back to work, we can take this moment to be so grateful for all the work that was done by people all across the state, all the different individuals and organizations coming together to take a stand against bad policy. It's exactly what we did, and we got what we needed for now. So take a moment to really relish this moment of this huge win that we've all been a part of. And then we need to start thinking about the special session. Governor Abbott, as he vetoed Senate Bill 3, at the same time, he announced a special session. This is a 30-day period, a session that can only be called by the governor, and it's for a very specific purpose. And he listed several bills. The number one bill on his list, Senate Bill 3, and regulating cannabis, regulating hemp, to be more specific. And so that is included on the call. So he says it's going to start July 21st. That's the kickoff to this 30-day period. They could end sooner if they pass all the bills sooner, which would be great because everybody wants to get back to their summer plans before they kick off their re-election campaigns. And so that's when this process starts. It's a 30-day period, could be less. It operates a lot like a regular session, but on a very short time frame. There will be opportunity to testify, opportunity to lobby legislators, and I encourage everyone to start sooner than later. Especially a lot of these representatives and senators are already announcing their re-election campaign, which means their ears are more open than they usually are. So take the opportunity to engage with them on this issue right now, between now and the special session that starts January 21st. Since we're short on time because we have so much to talk about, I will just let y'all know that this proclamation is up on our website. It was really very heartening to read this proclamation because he talks very directly about the different lawsuits that have taken place around the country, and that Senate Bill 3 would no doubt be wrapped up in litigation because other states have won these cases, that the state can't just prohibit these products entirely. He also talks about regulation being the only way to truly control these products. So I encourage you to read this. He also has let me see if I can just click here quickly. He has a long list of recommendations to be in the legislation. This looks like an overview of the bill that was passed by the State Affairs Committee in the House. As we all recall, Senate Bill 3 started out as an outright prohibition bill, came over to the Senate. When it made it to State Affairs with leadership from Chairman Ken King, it was gutted and overhauled and turned into a regulatory bill. A less than perfect regulatory bill, but a regulatory bill nonetheless. They worked out a lot of the details and passed that bill out of committee. And as we all know, once it got to the floor, it was a bit of a bait and switch, and it was back to prohibition. But we have that legislation that was drafted very thoughtfully by Chairman King, the House State Affairs Committee, and the Speaker of the House. So this overview that he gives here looks a lot like that bill. So that may be the starting point of where we're coming from. Now, I know that we are going to be faced with a lot of challenges of trying to water that down, make it worse off than it started. So we're going to have to combat that. But I think that we have a good idea of what we're going to be looking at. So keep that in mind as you move forward with communicating with lawmakers about this policy. I'm going to open it up to questions. I think that we have answered, talked about everything that was on my agenda. So let's look at questions. If you have a question, you can raise your hand or drop it in the chat. I'm going to start with Holly because she might have a question that's already ready to go for us. Holly, do we have a question to start us off?
I don't have, oh, hold on. One's coming through. Is there any lawsuits regarding medical discrimination for teacup patients? Been a patient for 4 years and just lost a great job for it.
We haven't seen any of those lawsuits in Texas. I know that there's a couple attorneys on the call, and if anybody wants to chime in, they can. But I haven't seen anything specifically on that, but it speaks to a bigger issue of patient protection. There is a provision that actually I need to add to my overview here about patient protection. The Compassionate Use Registry of Texas, also known as CURT, contains all of the patient information. When a patient goes to their doctor, the doctor visits with them, decides if they can benefit from cannabis and if they qualify. And if they do, they get enrolled in the registry. Once they go to a dispensary, the dispensary logs into that registry and can see the patient's information and how much they're supposed to dispense. Also having access is law enforcement, so that they're able to verify a patient when they get pulled over and have their medicine with them, or however else they're encountering law enforcement. And we and others wanted to be very sure that this patient information is protected, that it's only being viewed and used by the people that actually need it. So a patient's information is now confidential within the Compassionate Use Registry, and the fact that they are in the registry is also confidential. This should help. I don't think that it secures gun rights for patients, unfortunately, but I think it could help with that. But on a bigger picture standpoint, we need to have patient protections in place for custody, for employment, like you're talking about here. And again, for gun rights, figuring out how we can ensure that a patient doesn't have to give up their right to self-defense simply for participating in this program and using the medicine that helps them best.
David, Sergey, did you want to add anything to that?
Hang on.
Thank you.
I was recently on a panel up in New York on employee rights, and unfortunately, the trend in the case law just hasn't been that good, except in cases like states like California and Oregon. There were some really bad cases that had come actually out of Texas. There have been some bad case law that had come out of Virginia. I don't see, unless there's a legislative mandate, to have employee protections for either medical use or cannabinoid use through whatever is left of our retail establishments.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've got work to do on that front.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I know there's a case starting to percolate up with a compassionate use fireman who was terminated. I know that one of my dear friends up in New York is involved in that, but I don't think it's going very well right now.
Thanks for sharing that.
Thank
Luke,
you.
I see you have your hand raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, this is Luke. Okay, so I have one question for HB 46 and one question for SB 3. Am I allowed to ask question for HB 46 since that is signed already?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the question for HB 46, I have reviewed that the bill briefly. I found there is a very interesting point because that bill allowed the manufacturer or producer to test their product in-house and to generate certificate. I think there is conflict interest because if I'm producer, I make something, it's just a little bit over than a 10 milligram. I maybe give my product green light. Yes, you never know because I test in-house. So
Yeah.
I think there's to be independent between producer and lab testing. Lab testing to be the third parties to be authorized, by ISO or by some other kind of like the accreditation organization. Yes, that is one question for HB 46.
I couldn't agree more. There is a conflict of interest there and a lack of accountability. I have, I trust the businesses that are operating now. I think that they have everything to lose by not having high quality product. However, from a big picture perspective, you're exactly right. You can't have somebody testing their own product and that be the compliance check. Currently, they test their own product, they make the results available to DPS, but very rarely do they actually verify those results. This is a big opportunity for accountability, and we can help to make those changes during the rulemaking process. I think it absolutely needs to be brought up, and I'm glad you asked that here. Go ahead and ask about Senate Bill 3.
Oh, yes. Well, before that, I just want to give the brief self-introduction. I'm Luke Wang, and I'm a doctor of science, environmental science, and chemistry. I did my postdoctoral program at Rice University, and I, 20 plus years experience in my background, and also the 5+ years experience in cannabis, hemp, or medical cannabis testing. And also, I'm running my lab in Houston right now, and to test those products from different, the retailers or producers. Okay, so my question for the SB3, I want to say, for the new, let's say, the next step for the SB3, I think for the regulation part, the testing should be testing is very essential actually, and also I think actually I attended this public testimony session in Austin. I think back to April. One of that is HB 28. HB 28. Actually, the representative King he mentioned about that. I think there's to be a lab testing in state because my customer, for example, like THC Club or some other kind of retailer, they got report from California or Washington State or even Colorado. But once they give me their product, I test in house. We are ISO 17025 accredited lab. We found different. I mean, like they claim their delta 9 is under 0.3%, but we found their delta 9 sometimes is 0.4, sometimes 1%. So I think the in-state testing is essential. And also not only for cannabinoids, but also for the pesticides or heavy metals or microbial pathogens, for example, like E. coli, aspergillus. Because consumer they don't only consume the cannabinoid, they consume pesticides, heavy metal, and the microbials.
And even
If those product,
concentrated, all those things concentrated too sometimes.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, that may
Yeah.
kill those people, in days or in weeks. So I think lab testing should be very critical for the regulation.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, and that has certainly been talked about. One thing I'll note here for y'all is I went ahead and added today the committee substitute for Senate Bill 3, which is where I think we're going to be starting from in the special session. There's no indication that that's exactly where we're going to be starting from, but that's my general instinct on it. I went ahead and added this so that we can see exactly what that bill did, and a part of that bill was in-state labs that are DEA certified. So that should address the concern that you have there. But this is an advocacy opportunity, making sure that lawmakers understand why it's important to have that provision. And others may have other perspectives, being able to do it at labs outside of the state may bring the cost down. And so maybe there's some opportunity for a discussion on the pros and cons of each approach.
Okay, so by the way, I am also running a lab in Oklahoma State because
Okay.
Oklahoma they legalized medical cannabis. Okay, so they do have their in-state DEA, but they don't call DEA, they call a Bureau of Narcotics and Drug Control, something like that, because the federal DEA they are very slow. They are very slow. Actually, I submitted the application for the Oklahoma lab in 2022, and it didn't really give me any response yet.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. I was wondering about that. Like, is DEA certification cumbersome for labs? Is it difficult to get that certification or registration? So I appreciate you bringing that up. We should definitely look into that a little bit more. I really appreciate your question, Luke. Thanks for
Yes.
being here with us.
Thank you,
Sure,
Luke.
thank you.
I do have a few more questions that are coming in.
Yeah.
Next up is well, somebody has requested you put Senate Bill 2024 on the website so people can kind of just get an idea of the breakdown. But can you just kind of roughly go over that again? The specific question was that it does remove cannabis vapes.
It does. It does. And so Senate Bill 2024 is a bill that overhauls vape in general, vape regulations and laws in general. And it puts regulations on even non-nicotine vapes. That was probably the biggest change, is that all of these regulations that they had in place applied to vapes with nicotine. And now they're removing that requirement, and everything that applied to nicotine vapes now applies to any kind of vape. That was the general effort of what the bill was trying to do. However, what it also did, and had a nice little provision there, is that no vape devices can have any amount of any cannabinoids or mushrooms or kratom. And so that means that all vape cannabinoids will be illegal in Texas starting September 1st, except the approved vape devices through the compassionate use program. And I don't think those will be available September 1st. So it's going to be a period of time before the rules get made, the devices get manufactured, and they actually get rolled out. I think that this is a misstep. I think vaping, when done right, vape devices, when made properly and with the right product, can help people to not smoke, which we know is not as healthy. And so I think they should be available, but this is the decision that the legislature made, and something for us to have them reconsider next time around.
And one little insert I would just like to include is that we did get confirmation that all products in the teacup program are tested in-house and then sent off for third-party testing through DPS. So just wanted to mention that.
Are they done it every time that person mentioned?
Terrence, do you want to jump in? Or in the chat?
Well, we can definitely get clarification. I appreciate that being brought
Every
up.
batch is sent off. Yes, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, my understanding is that they're not sent off every time, but they may be. That may be a misunderstanding on my part. So I look forward to learning more about that.
All right. And hopefully that answered your question on Senate Bill 2024. The next question is there a specific committee that we need to prioritize setting up meetings with? Example, like the Senate and House Affairs.
Top on the list, State Affairs. That's
State
what the bill
Affairs.
was last time. So the House and the Senate have State Affairs committees. I think that those are our priorities. You may also look and see how your representative voted and prioritize communicating with them at the Capitol if they voted against it. I'll take this opportunity to let you know that under the resources tab, you'll find legislator voting records. We have everything compiled here for you to be able to find how they voted on these two major bills. And I think I will go ahead and add the vaping bill to this so that we have it for reference. And we're going to be adding the special session voting records here as soon as we have them available.
Okay, next question. Can it be interpreted that teacup expansion bill now allows for cannabis flower and concentrate products for inhalers and nebulizers?
Yep, I think so. I don't see any statutory prohibition on flower within the Compassionate Use Act. And the only reason, well, and maybe somebody, if there's one of the licensees that's on the call today that would like to clarify, my understanding is that DPS has been unreasonably restrictive in not allowing them to approve flower. And it's arguable about whether or not the department even has that authority. So that hasn't been sorted out, but that's my understanding, is that there's nothing in the law that keeps us from having flower through teacup. It's a regulatory problem, and maybe we can fix that through the rulemaking process this fall.
Okay. The next one on Abbott's list in the proclamation, read testing requirements at every phase of the production manufacturing. The concern is that this would eliminate THCA flower since decarb happens naturally over time. Any thoughts on the potential consequences and if this would essentially ban flower or how we plan to fight?
Well, I can tell you that in committee substitute for Senate Bill 3, the one that passed the House State Affairs Committee, it did prohibit flower, period. Of course, we don't think that we should be banning flower. It only sends that part of the industry over to the illicit market, and flower is most certainly safer through regulated channels of supply. And so we would definitely want that to be changed, but in that bill, it banned it. So I don't think that what we're talking about here is thinking with flower in mind. So we'll have to keep that in mind. But if there's anybody on the call that would like to address that, I would certainly welcome it. Okay, let's go ahead and do the next question.
Okay. Next one I have, what will the process look like for SB3 in the special session? Will things work the same as during the regular session with committee hearings and then the House and Senate votes? What are the most important things that we can do right now?
Yes, you're exactly right. It's all the same, but much shorter time periods. And so we will have the opportunity to testify, but I'll tell you that testifying is important. It's important to get this information on the record. But it's really more important for you to go to the Capitol and visit with these committee members and their staff in advance of the hearing. You want them going in prepped and ready for that hearing so they can ask the right questions. They can be listening to the testimony with context that you've already provided. Now, a lot of them have a lot of context. We just came off of a legislative session. We talked a lot about this. But in general, these private meetings ahead of time are far more impactful than the 2 minutes that we each get at the committee hearing. So I would encourage you to go in and visit with these staffers and with the legislators. If you can get a personal meeting, of course, that's better. But start doing that as soon as you can. We know the special session's coming. So how can we start prepping now? It's by getting into the Capitol. A lot of them are going to be taking time off, so it may be difficult to get a meeting, but the sooner you can get on their radar and start building that relationship, the better off you're going to be.
Great question. Can patients fly with their medicine?
Patients cannot fly with their medicine. Medicine with the compassionate use program can have up to 1% THC, and the federal threshold is 0.3% THC. You can't cross state lines with even state legal marijuana from the program. There is a way in some states that if you're a patient in one state, it's called reciprocity, that if you're a patient here in Texas and you're going to another medical state, they may recognize your prescription, your recommendation, your certification here in Texas there, and you can go in and purchase your medicine from a medical cannabis dispensary. But every state is different, so look into the rules in the state you're traveling to and see if you are going to be able to have your certification honored in the state that you're visiting.
I'm going to keep us on medical right now. Next question. I can get 30 milligram gummies currently. Would this no longer be available under teacup? Instead, under this new program, I would have to take 3 10 milligram gummies to get to the 30 milligrams.
That's right. That's
That
right.
is correct.
Which is, you know, a little bit disappointing that they have that 1% remains and the 10 milligrams. Had it been just the 10 milligrams, they could make tiny little bitty gummies with 10 milligrams. And that way you're taking less of the gelatin and the sugar and all of that. But unfortunately, the legislature did keep the 1% THC cap and a maximum of 10 milligrams per unit. So I hope that that doesn't raise the prices for you too much. I know that during one of my conversations with one of the licensed businesses, I asked about whether or not they charge per milligram. And so if they're charging you the same for 3 10 milligrams as they did for 1 30 milligram, then maybe the cost offsets and it ends up being a wash for you at the end, other than the filler product that's in it. I hope that answers your question.
We'll stick with another teacup question. Would it be reasonable to assume that flower might have a good chance to be added to teacup in 2027?
I don't think we have to wait till 2027 necessarily. As I mentioned earlier, during the rulemaking process, we may be able to get them to open up flower. I think it's a regulatory chokehold that they may or may not have the actual legal authority to do. That's something for us to look into and hopefully change during the rulemaking process.
Okay, we're going to go back to SB3. What about THCA flower? Is that still good to sell and use? Currently, yes, it is. The next question that falls under that. Oh, sorry, I lost it. Well, you can go on that if you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah, Holly's right that THCA is still legal. We're under current law until September. Well, we're under current law indefinitely at this point, depending on what the legislature decides to do in the special session. But as of right now, we're rolling with the status quo from now until there is legislative action taken to the contrary. So all products that are currently legal remain legal until the legislature takes action during the special session. And their bill, whatever they pass, is likely to go into effect September 1st, just like SB3 would have.
Which leads to the next, which, yes, if overall federally they outright ban hemp products, THCA, then yes, that would overpower what the state has decided.
Well, maybe there's somebody smarter than me. Maybe there's an attorney here that because I know that our medical cannabis program violates state law or federal law. It exceeds the 0.3% THC threshold. So if states are willing to institute policies that maybe challenge the federal government, like we've seen pervasively across the country for decades now, then maybe we would be able to have a better law here in spite of federal law banning these products. Any attorneys on the line that would like to chime in about that? Aaron, I don't know if you have your hand up for another question or did you want to chime in on that one? Oh, bye, Aaron.
Hey, Heather, thank you. I
Oh,
have
there you go.
just a question. I am not an attorney and I don't have anything to chime in on that. Your last comment was in regards to SB3 and whatever updates we may incur through special session. You said that it was likely to become law on September 1st, and that struck a big question mark in my eyes, which we were discussing this morning, which is plain and simple. If 30 days starts on July 21st and things go and we get some updates to SB3, do you find that businesses will be required to be within compliance 10 days later on September 1st? Or could there be a potential to be by the end of the year, for example, in case there's major issues that will, require a business to, say, move large amounts of inventory across state lines or something of that nature?
Yeah, really good question. In a previous bill, it may have been the committee substitute for Senate Bill 3. There was a provision that allowed businesses to liquidate or otherwise get rid of their product by January 1st, as you're mentioning. So while the bill goes into effect September 1st for like possession charges, for example, I mean, we're kind of creating a scenario where they're banning it, which I don't even want to speak into existence. But were that to happen, there would be possession charges would go into effect September 1st, but businesses would be able to liquidate by January 1st. That was my general understanding of what was included in the committee sub.
Very interesting. Thank you. So with that being said, to be completely clear and to repeat it back to you, an individual that was in possession of these products could potentially be found and charged with possession in a negative way, while, say, the business or provider of that product would have till the end of the year to, say, secure their warehouse and get it liquidated or moved out of state.
Could be. This is all kind of hypothetical because there's nothing on the table at this very moment. And we're all pulling for a regulation bill rather than a prohibition bill.
Right.
And so, yes, there's a scenario where that would be the case.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thanks for all you do, Aaron. I see Luke, you have another quick question?
Oh, yes, just a quick comment to the THCA flower. TGCA flower is a tricky, actually, it's a product. If you do not burn it, it's fine, and the TGCA is TGCA 3939. But usually, I know because I run the lab, right, 5 year experience for the testing. I know that like USDA or some other state, they use some equation to calculate the how to convert a TGCA to 39. Like they use 0.877 that equation. I'm not sure you are aware of that equation, but yeah, I think okay. So this is the scientifically they mentioned. Let's say if you have 10% TGCA, 0% delta 9,
Oh, yes.
yeah, and you
Mhm.
need to multiply 0.877, which means like
Yes.
you have 8.77% delta 9,
Yes.
like that, But if you don't burn it, that's the TGCA, TGCA 39, 39. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Appreciate that, Luke.
sure. Yep.
Next up.
How do I start to get with a cure doctor? A teacup doctor, I'm assuming, find one, and does my current doctor offer any help with me getting accepted? So how does somebody get on the teacup program?
Yeah, excellent question. There is a full list of all the doctors on the DPS website. They have a whole web page and area on their website dedicated to the compassionate use program. Within that, they have a list of all the doctors available where you'd be able to find the ones that are in your area and contact them directly. A doctor does need to be registered in the program in order to prescribe and enroll patients in the registry. So your general doctor, if they're not enrolled in TCUP, they're not going to be able to get you enrolled in TCUP. So what I would recommend is talk to your doctor. Maybe they'd be interested in enrolling, and you can help to be the catalyst to make it available for all the rest of the patients, including yourself. So I would recommend talking to your own doctor if you feel safe enough to do that. And then also go to the website, DPS website, just Google DPS Compassionate Use Program. It'll pop right up for you. Actually, I believe it's on our resources page, which I'm not going to try to find right now, but I believe it's on there actually. And where you can find a list of all the doctors, find one in your area, call around, see where you can get an appointment. I know there's also a lot of doctors that do telemedicine. Dr. Matthew Brimberry is someone that we know very closely, and he does telemedicine. He's an excellent physician, and would probably be happy to talk with you about that. So good luck with getting enrolled, and I hope the medicine helps you.
And also you can head to the Good Bland website or even Texas Original. They both have on their ways to get in contact with the doctor and get enrolled in their program. And the link is dropped in the chat for anyone who's curious.
Excellent. That's perfect. And, they're going to be able to answer all the questions that you have about the medicine, about the program. Definitely lean on them as a resource.
Okay, I have two more questions that I'm going to tie in together for the Senate Bill 2024 for the vape ban.
Okay.
Somebody asked specifically, does it matter if it's detachable? And the second one was, how can we reverse the vape ban?
I don't think that it matters if it's detachable, but I'm not certain on the legal details of that, because if it's just a cartridge, that's not a vape device. That's just
Right.
cannabis oil in glass. So maybe an attorney would be able to answer that better, because I'm just not sure about the specifics of the law in that case. How do we go about fixing that? Well, we could call on the governor to add it to the call for the special session. That's one way. And if he wants to add it on there, then he can, and then we can have legislation on it this special session. Alternatively, it would be the next regular legislative session, which begins January of 2027. It seems like a long way off, but it's really not. It's going to come real quick for us, for better or worse.
Right. When should we be advocating the Congress during special session to include other provisions like medical flower? Other states nearby are getting this business, and I think that we would want this in Texas.
I definitely agree. I think having access to whole plant flower is critical for patients, especially we're going to have approved vaping devices where you can vape the whole flower, which is a really great opportunity to have the benefit of that whole plant, not necessarily a concentrated product, but just right from the ground, cured and into your product. So I think that we should do that. Again, the problem, as I understand it, is with DPS. and we may be able to address that during the rulemaking process. If they know that enough people are paying attention to it, then perhaps we'll be able to influence them to open that up, allow patients to use these products for vaping at least. But once the flower is made available, then patients can do what they like with it, whether it's making tea or something else.
Should we be emailing and calling Abbott's office to thank him for veto?
I think that's a great idea. I think we always want to praise these guys when they do something well. And as we've all seen with Dan Patrick, we want to knock them when they're not, and we want to make sure that we express our gratitude. It's a really big deal that he went against the political establishment in Texas. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is a very powerful political player. He controls a lot in politics in Texas. And for the governor to do what's right in spite of that huge amount of pressure really says a lot about his character and the way that he looks at this issue. And I think that we should recognize, acknowledge, and show gratitude for that. So tag him in a post thanking him on social media. I know his team will see that. Send an email, make a phone call, let him know that you appreciate what he's doing here, and looking forward to the legislative session. I think that is all the questions, unless there's one really pressing question you think we should do before we wrap up.
Just as a special session, possible regulation going to include input from industry professionals and producers, wholesalers, and retailers.
Absolutely. They will receive input from everyone who shows up to be heard.
That's
So
right.
mark your calendar for July 21st. That's the first day of the special session. In the meantime, though, don't wait until then. Communicate with committee members and your own legislators, your representative and your senator as soon as possible.
And I think maybe the most important question tonight, when is Heather running for Lieutenant Governor, Governor of Texas?
Why do you hate me? I don't think I'm well suited for politics to that degree, but I appreciate the confidence that you have in me. And I'm grateful for all the support of all the folks that we've been working with over the years, the folks that were so active and engaged during the legislative session. This veto was only possible because people made sure that their voices were heard. They decided to get active and engaged on social media, at the Capitol, and they made it possible for this veto to occur. So can't express my gratitude enough for everyone who participated. We are going to be hosting the Texas Cannabis Policy Conference this September at Texas A&M. This is a meeting of the minds to talk about policy. Not your typical hemp or cannabis conference or convention. This is really laser focused on policy, and we're going to be doing it at the great Texas A&M University. So I will close us out by playing a recap video from last year, and we hope to see you there again.
Welcome to the Texas Cannabis Policy Conference 2024. This year, we've brought together experts from around the country, industry experts, policy experts, talking about how we can institute policies that make sense in Texas. We're seeing folks from all spectrums, all walks of life coming together on an issue that we agree on, marijuana law reform.
Heather? Okay, so I really appreciate you organize this meeting.
My
let's give it just
motivation was, let's change the perception of cannabis. People need to understand that this is medicine and that real businesses and real people provide this medicine. And to kind of move it away from that stigma of the pothead, there's a lot more to cannabis.
So I'm here at the Texas Cannabis Policy Conference so that we can learn. We all need to learn. Especially we need to learn best practices, and we need to know, why haven't we already adopted certain policies? What's the big thing that we should or shouldn't be fearing? Texas likes to lead in this nation, but on this issue, we are way behind. And so that's why I'm here, because I know for a fact there are hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of Texans, that could benefit from the medical qualities that the cannabis has to bring.
This is a huge step for cannabis in Texas. To be here at Texas A&M is a big thing, because we're in the heart of Texas. Texas is very conservative. I think with Aggieland, getting on board with this is a huge step forward for our industry.
I feel like honestly getting into the universities in Texas is such an important factor. Like, I feel like so many Texans still don't know what the state of things are. So A&M or UT or any of the big universities here, it's so important that they have buy-in. They have buy-in. Everybody that they touch has potential to come onto the program as well.
A big thank you to all of our sponsors and everyone who attended the Texas Cannabis Policy Conference.
The Texas Cannabis Policy Conference
Is the future of cannabis in Texas.
All right. Okay, thanks everybody for joining. If you're not already subscribed to our email list, please do so. We're going to be sending out early bird specials to the conference, continued updates on the legislative session that is coming, and rulemaking. So thanks everybody for being here.